Excuse me, this section is for paying customers only. Coach is that way. Amanda Richardson didn't even glance up from her magazine as she dismissed Victoria Brooks with a wave of her manicured hand diamond tennis bracelet, catching the cabin lights like shards of superiority. The words hit Victoria like a physical blow, but her expression remained perfectly composed. She stood in the narrow aisle of Flight 447's first-class cabin, her boarding pass clutched in steady fingers, watching a woman who'd just made the most expensive assumption of her life. Before we dive into how one racist assumption cost this passenger everything she thought privilege could buy, drop your location in the comments and hit that subscribe button because this 30-second exchange is about to ground a $200 million aircraft and change the airline industry forever. Victoria Brooks was accustomed to being underestimated. At 39, she'd built Phoenix Technologies from a Stanford dorm room idea into a $3.8 billion software empire that revolutionized how airlines managed everything from crew scheduling to passenger safety protocols. Her company's AI-driven platforms powered the reservation systems for 63 airlines across 4 continents, including Skyline Airlines, the very carrier whose first-class cabin she now stood in. She was traveling to New York for the final signatures on the largest acquisition in Phoenix Technologies' history, a deal that would expand her company's reach into every major airport in North America. The paperwork in her leather briefcase represented 18 months of negotiations, countless red-eye flights, and the kind of strategic thinking that had earned her a spot on Forbes' Most Powerful Women list 3 years running. But none of that mattered to Amanda Richardson, who saw only a black woman in a simple navy blazer and assumed she was lost. "I have a confirmed seat," Victoria said quietly, her voice carrying the kind of controlled authority that came from years of boardroom negotiations. She held up her boarding pass. 1A. Amanda finally looked up, her blue eyes scanning Victoria with the kind of casual dismissal usually reserved for service staff. She was 52, with the kind of aggressively maintained blonde hair that required weekly salon visits and the confidence that came from never having her presence questioned anywhere. "That's impossible," Amanda said, her tone suggesting Victoria was either lying or illiterate. "These are premium seats. They cost $8,000 each." She gestured toward her husband, Richard, a heavy-set man in his mid-50s who was pointedly ignoring the conversation while scrolling through his phone. "We're first-class passengers. We belong here." Victoria felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with moments like these. She'd experienced variations of this scene in hotel lobbies, restaurant hostess stations, and conference rooms around the world. The assumption was always the same. Her success was impossible. Her presence an error that needed correction. "As am I," Victoria replied evenly. "A first-class passenger, with a confirmed seat in 1A. The cabin around them buzzed with the typical pre-flight energy. Other passengers were settling into their seats, stowing carry-on luggage and checking phones one last time before takeoff. Flight 447 was a popular route LAX to JFK filled with business travelers, entertainment industry executives, and tech entrepreneurs. Most were absorbed in their own pre-flight routines, but a few were beginning to notice the tension building near the front of the aircraft. Elena Vasquez, a 28-year-old travel blogger seated in 3C, looked up from her laptop. She'd been documenting her latest assignment, a piece about airline customer service, when she noticed the confrontation. Her journalist instincts immediately kicked in. Something about the body language told her this wasn't a simple seating mix-up. Brandon Foster, a 31-year-old social media influencer in 2B, glanced over from his phone where he'd been preparing to document his flight for his 2.3 million TikTok followers. The tension in the air was palpable, and Brandon had built his entire career on recognizing moments that would resonate with audiences. Amanda's voice grew louder, drawing more attention. "Richard, call the flight attendant. This person is clearly confused about where she's supposed to sit." Richard looked uncomfortable, but nodded, pressing the call button above their seats. He'd learned over 27 years of marriage that disagreeing with Amanda in public rarely ended well, and he had no intention of getting involved in what he assumed was a simple misunderstanding. Victoria remained standing, her posture straight, but relaxed. She'd learned long ago that reacting with anger or frustration only gave people like Amanda more ammunition. Instead, she waited, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Her phone buzzed. A text from her COO, Michael Torres' flight on scheduled board meeting confirmed for 3 p.m. Eastern. She typed back quickly. Slight delay. Nothing I can't handle. She had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. The flight attendant call button chimed and Carmen Martinez appeared from the galley. At 34, Carmen had 8 years of experience with Skyline Airlines and had seen every possible passenger conflict. She approached with the practiced smile of someone trained to de-escalate situations while maintaining airline policy. "Is everything all right here?" Carmen asked, her eyes moving between Victoria and the seated couple. "Yes, there's a problem," Amanda said before Victoria could respond. "This person claims to have our seat, but clearly there's been some kind of mistake." She gestured dismissively toward Victoria. "Perhaps she has a coach ticket and got confused." Carmen looked at Victoria apologetically. "Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass?" Victoria handed it over without a word. Carmen scanned the barcode with her handheld device, and her eyebrows raised slightly. The screen showed not just a valid first-class ticket, but a platinum executive status that commanded special attention. Mrs. Brooks Carmen read from the screen. "Your reservation is confirmed for seat 1A. You have platinum executive status with us." She turned to Amanda and Richard. "I'm sorry, but there seems to be some confusion. May I see your boarding passes?" Richard fumbled for their tickets while Amanda's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. The kind of anger that came from being contradicted in public, especially by someone she'd already decided didn't belong. "This is ridiculous," Amanda snapped. "Check your computer again. We're the Richardsons. Richard is a former managing director at Goldman Sachs. I'm a principal at Richardson Properties. We've been flying this route for 15 years. Victoria watched the performance with growing interest. She'd seen this playbook before. When caught in an obvious mistake, some people doubled down, hoping their credentials would override facts. Carmen checked the Richardsons' boarding passes. "Mr. and Mrs. Richardson, you're confirmed in seats 3A and 3B. The cabin had grown quieter. Other passengers were now openly listening to the exchange. Elena had quietly started recording on her phone, sensing this was becoming something more than a simple misunderstanding. 3. Amanda's voice cracked with indignation. "We specifically requested seats 1 and 2. We always sit in row 1. There must be an error in your computer." Victoria spoke for the first time in several minutes. "There's no error. I purchased seat 1A 6 weeks ago when I booked this flight. I have the confirmation email, the receipt, and as your colleague just verified a valid boarding pass." Amanda turned on her with the kind of fury reserved for people who'd been publicly embarrassed. "I don't know what kind of scam you're running, but—" "Excuse me." Victoria's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "What exactly are you implying?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Amanda had walked to the edge of a cliff, and everyone in first class was waiting to see if she'd step back or jump. She jumped. "People like you," Amanda said. Her voice, dripping with contempt, always seemed to find ways to get things you haven't earned. Maybe you used points. Maybe someone gave you an upgrade. But people like me pay full fare for seats like this. The cabin went silent. Even the flight attendants in the galley stopped their pre-flight preparations. Elena's phone captured every word. Brandon had started live streaming to his followers without even announcing it, his viewer count climbing rapidly as people shared the feed. Victoria felt the familiar surge of anger that came with naked racism, but also something else: opportunity. She'd spent 15 years building a company specifically designed to solve problems in the aviation industry. She'd developed platforms to track passenger satisfaction, identify service gaps, and improve customer experiences. And now she was living through exactly the kind of incident her technology was designed to prevent. "I see," Victoria said quietly. "And what kind of person am I exactly?" Amanda seemed to realize she'd crossed a line, but her pride wouldn't let her retreat. "You know exactly what I mean." "No," Victoria replied. "I don't." "Please explain." The request was delivered with the kind of deadly calm that usually preceded corporate executives firing entire departments. But Amanda was too angry to recognize the danger. Carmen stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable. "Ladies, perhaps we can resolve this quickly. Mrs. Richardson, if you and your husband could please move to your assigned seats, we can—" "Absolutely not," Amanda interrupted. "I've been flying first class for 20 years. I know how this works. Check your manifest again. Run whatever verification you need to run. But I am not moving for someone who obviously doesn't belong here." Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She opened her contacts and scrolled to a number she rarely used for personal matters. "Carmen Victoria said I'm going to make a phone call. It will take approximately 90 seconds. After that call, Mrs. Richardson will no longer be a problem for you or anyone else on this aircraft." She pressed the number and raised the phone to her ear. "Michael, it's Victoria. I need you to pull the Skyline Airlines contract file. Yes, the master service agreement. We're about to have a conversation about passenger experience standards." Victoria's voice carried just loud enough for Amanda to hear, but not loud enough for the implication to fully sink in. She turned slightly away, continuing the conversation in the measured tones of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected thousands of people. Amanda looked puzzled, but not yet concerned. She turned to Richard, who was nervously checking his own phone, scrolling through what appeared to be stock portfolios and email messages. "Richard, are you listening to me?" Amanda hissed. "This woman is trying to take our seats and you're just sitting there." Richard looked up, clearly uncomfortable with the growing attention their confrontation was drawing. "Maybe we should just take the seats in row 3. They're still first class and this is turning into a scene." "Absolutely not." Amanda's voice rose again, causing more passengers to look their way. "I refuse to be intimidated by someone who clearly doesn't understand how things work." "Carmen, I want to speak to the captain. This passenger is being disruptive and making other passengers uncomfortable." Carmen glanced around first class, noting that Victoria was quietly speaking on her phone while Amanda was the one raising her voice and creating the disturbance. But customer service training taught her to avoid directly contradicting passengers when possible. "I can call the senior flight attendant," Carmen offered. "Sarah Collins is our crew chief today." "Do it," Amanda demanded. "And while you're at it, call security. I want this person's ticket verified through your home office. There's obviously been some kind of fraud or computer error." Elena, still recording from 3C, whispered to the passenger next to her. "This is unbelievable. She's basically accusing that woman of stealing a ticket." The passenger, a middle-aged businessman named David Kim, shook his head. "I've seen this before. Some people can't imagine others might actually belong in first class." Brandon had now attracted over 15,000 live viewers to his stream. Comments were flooding in as people watched the confrontation unfold in real time. This Karen is about to learn something. The black woman is way too calm. She knows something. Why is no one helping her? This is racist as hell. Plot twist incoming. Victoria ended her call and turned back to the group. Her expression remained neutral, but something had shifted in her demeanor. She looked less like a passenger trying to resolve a misunderstanding and more like an executive preparing to deliver difficult news. Carmen Victoria said, "I need you to call Captain Walsh to first class. Also, please ask Sarah Collins to join us. This situation requires senior crew intervention." Carmen nodded and reached for her internal phone, but Amanda interrupted. "I already asked for the crew chief. You don't get to make demands about who gets called where." Amanda's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Richard, why aren't you doing anything? Call the credit card company. Verify our platinum status. Show them we belong here." Richard was scrolling frantically through his phone, but his expression was growing increasingly troubled. "Amanda, maybe we should just—" "Don't you dare suggest we back down," Amanda snapped. "I've had enough of this nonsense." Sarah Collins emerged from the galley, a veteran flight attendant with 20 years of experience reading passenger dynamics. She'd been briefed by Carmen over the intercom and approached the situation with the kind of professional caution that came from dealing with thousands of similar conflicts. "Good morning, everyone," Sarah said with practiced authority. "I understand we're having a seating issue. Let's see if we can resolve this quickly so we can prepare for departure." Amanda immediately stood, positioning herself as the aggrieved party. "Thank you for coming. This passenger," she pointed at Victoria, "is claiming to have our seats. Our confirmed paid first-class seats that we've held for months." Sarah looked at Victoria, who remained calm and standing in the aisle. "Ma'am, may I see your documentation?" Victoria handed over her boarding pass and identification. Sarah scanned them with her device and, like Carmen before her, raised her eyebrows at what appeared on the screen. "Mrs. Brooks, you have platinum executive status and a confirmed seat in 1A. Sarah turned to Amanda. "Ma'am, your boarding passes show seats 3A and 3B. "That's impossible," Amanda insisted. "We specifically requested row 1. We always sit in row 1. Check your computer again." Sarah's training had taught her to remain diplomatic, but she was beginning to lose patience. "Ma'am, I've checked twice. Your seats are confirmed in row 3. "Then your computer is wrong," Amanda declared. "I want you to call the airline's customer service line. I want to speak to a supervisor. I want this resolved immediately." Victoria spoke for the first time since her phone call. "Sarah, has Captain Walsh been notified? He's being briefed now," Sarah replied, somewhat surprised that a passenger would ask about crew communications. Amanda whirled on Victoria. "Why are you asking about the captain? What kind of game are you playing?" Victoria met her gaze steadily. "I'm not playing any game, Mrs. Richardson. I'm simply trying to get to my assigned seat so this aircraft can depart on time." "Your assigned seat?" Amanda's voice dripped with skepticism. "Do you have any idea how much these tickets cost? Do you understand what kind of people fly first class?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Everyone within earshot understood exactly what Amanda was implying, and the cabin tension ratcheted up another notch. Elena zoomed in on Amanda's face, capturing the moment for her growing audience of viewers who were sharing the stream across social media platforms. The hashtag Flight447 was already beginning to trend in Los Angeles as people posted and shared the live footage. "What kind of people?" Victoria asked quietly. Amanda seemed to realize she was walking into dangerous territory, but her pride and anger pushed her forward. "Successful people. People who've earned their status through hard work and achievement. People who don't need to find alternative ways to access luxury." The implication was crystal clear. Victoria nodded slowly as if considering the statement carefully. "I see. So your assumption is that I couldn't have legitimately purchased this ticket. I'm not assuming anything." Amanda backtracked slightly. "I'm just saying there are procedures for these things. Verification processes. Ways to ensure that seats go to the people who actually paid for them." Richard finally looked up from his phone, his face pale. "Amanda," he said quietly, "maybe we should just move to our actual seats." "Richard, don't you dare." Amanda stopped mid-sentence as she noticed his expression. "What's wrong with you?" Richard leaned closer to his wife, lowering his voice but not quite low enough to prevent others from hearing. "I just looked up first-class passenger lists for this flight. Do you know who Phoenix Technologies is?" Amanda looked blank. "No. Why would I?" "They're the company that just bought Skyline Airlines' entire computer system. Their CEO is—" Richard's voice trailed off as he looked at Victoria with growing recognition and horror, but Amanda wasn't paying attention to her husband's growing panic. She was focused entirely on what she saw as a challenge to her authority and social position. "I don't care what company she claims to work for," Amanda said loudly. "Anyone can say anything. What matters is that we have been loyal Skyline customers for 15 years. We have status. We have relationships with airline management. We know how these things work." Captain Walsh appeared at the entrance to first class, his presence immediately commanding attention. At 48, he had 20 years of commercial aviation experience, and the kind of calm authority that comes from managing crisis situations at 35,000 feet. "Good morning," he said, surveying the situation. "I understand we have a passenger concern that's delaying our departure." Amanda immediately stepped forward. "Captain, thank goodness." "I'm Amanda Richardson, and this is my husband, Richard. We're frequent first-class passengers on this route, and there seems to be a computer error with our seating assignments. This passenger," she gestured dismissively toward Victoria, "is claiming to have seats that we've held for months." Captain Walsh looked at Victoria, then at the flight attendants, then back at Amanda. "I see. And you verified all the documentation?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, sir. Mrs. Brooks has confirmed platinum status and a valid boarding pass for seat 1A. The Richardsons are confirmed in 3A and 3B. "Then I don't understand the problem," Captain Walsh said simply. Amanda's face flushed deeper. "The problem is that there's obviously been an error. Our travel agent specifically booked us in row 1. We have confirmation numbers, credit card receipts, everything." "Ma'am," Captain Walsh said with professional patience, "if you have documentation showing you purchased seat 1A, I'd be happy to review it." Amanda fumbled through her purse, pulling out printed confirmations. Captain Walsh examined them carefully, his expression growing more serious as he read. "Mrs. Richardson, these confirmations show seats 3A and 3B. There's no mention of row 1 anywhere in your documentation." The silence that followed was deafening. Amanda stared at the papers, as if they had betrayed her while Richard closed his eyes in what appeared to be defeat. That's impossible," Amanda stammered. "We always sit in row 1, every flight, every time." Victoria stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Captain Walsh, I believe Mrs. Richardson may be confusing this flight with previous travels. It happens. If it would help resolve this situation, I'm happy to wait while she contacts her travel agent to clarify the booking." It was a gracious offer that provided Amanda with a face-saving exit from her untenable position. Any reasonable person would have accepted it gratefully. Amanda was not feeling reasonable. "I don't need to call anyone," she declared. "I know what we booked. I know what we paid for. And I am not going to be lectured about airline procedures by someone who obviously doesn't belong in first class." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Captain Walsh's expression hardened. Sarah and Carmen exchanged glances. Elena's live stream viewership had climbed past 50,000 as people shared the feed across social media platforms. Victoria looked at Captain Walsh with the kind of meaningful expression that passed between professionals who recognized a situation had moved beyond simple resolution. Captain Victoria said quietly, "I think it's time we had a more detailed conversation about passenger services and airline policies." She pulled out her business card and handed it to him. Captain Walsh glanced at the card and his expression changed completely. His eyes widened slightly and he looked from the card to Victoria with new understanding. "Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice taking on a very different tone, "perhaps you and I should speak privately." The shift in Captain Walsh's demeanor was immediate and unmistakable. He studied Victoria's business card for several long seconds, and when he looked up, his expression had transformed from professional courtesy to something approaching alarm. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "would you mind if we stepped aside for a moment?" Amanda, who had been watching the exchange with growing frustration, inserted herself into the conversation. "Excuse me, Captain. I've been trying to resolve this seating issue for 10 minutes. Whatever this person wants to discuss with you can wait until after you've sorted out this computer error." Captain Walsh didn't even glance in Amanda's direction. His attention was entirely focused on Victoria, and the implications of the business card in his hand were clearly weighing heavily on his mind. Victoria nodded toward the galley. "Of course, Captain. Sarah, could you and Carmen join us as well? I think this conversation should include the entire senior crew." "Now wait. Just 1 minute," Amanda protested, her voice rising to a level that caused passengers throughout first class to turn and stare. "I was here first. I asked for help first. You can't just ignore paying customers because someone hands you a business card." Richard had been reading over his wife's shoulder at something on his phone, and his face had gone completely white. He grabbed Amanda's arm with obvious urgency. "Amanda," he said in a harsh whisper, "we need to move to our seats now." "Richard, what is wrong with you? Stop pulling on me." Amanda yanked her arm free and turned back toward Captain Walsh. "I demand that you resolve our seating situation before you deal with whatever she wants." Brandon, still live streaming to his growing audience of nearly 75,000 viewers, leaned forward to catch every word. The comments on his feed were moving so fast they were impossible to read, but the engagement numbers kept climbing. Captain Walsh finally looked at Amanda, and his expression was not encouraging. "Mrs. Richardson, you and your husband are welcome to take your confirmed seats in row 3. The seating chart is correct as displayed in our system. But we always sit in row 1, Amanda insisted, her voice taking on a desperate quality. "We're platinum members. We have status. We deserve better seats than." She gestured vaguely toward Victoria, but seemed unable to complete the sentence. Then what Victoria asked quietly. The question created a moment of absolute silence in the cabin. Elena's camera captured Amanda's face as she realized she was being asked to explicitly state what she'd been implying all along. "Then people who haven't earned them," Amanda finally said. Her chin raised in defiance. Sarah Collins stepped forward, her 20 years of experience telling her this situation was spiraling beyond normal passenger service protocols. "Mrs. Richardson, I need to inform you that your language is bordering on discriminatory, which violates federal aviation regulations regarding passenger conduct." "Discriminatory." Amanda's voice cracked with indignation. "I haven't said anything discriminatory. I'm simply trying to claim seats that we paid for." Carmen, who had been quietly observing the entire exchange, spoke up. "Ma'am, you've repeatedly suggested that Mrs. Brooks doesn't belong in first class despite her having valid documentation and platinum status. Because she doesn't look like—" Amanda stopped herself mid-sentence, finally recognizing the trap she was walking into. "Like what Victoria asked again." This time Amanda said nothing, but the silence was more damning than words. Captain Walsh looked at his watch, clearly aware that the departure delay was beginning to affect the flight schedule. "Mrs. Richardson, I'm going to ask you one final time to take your assigned seats. If you refuse, I'll have to consider whether you pose a disruption risk to this flight." Richard stood up abruptly, pulling their carry-on bags from the overhead compartment. "Amanda, we're moving. Now." "Richard, don't you dare." "We're moving now," Richard repeated, his voice carrying an authority that his wife had rarely heard. "Get your things." But Amanda wasn't finished. Her pride and fury had carried her past the point of rational decision-making, and she was determined to have the last word. "This is absolutely unacceptable," she declared to the cabin at large. "Loyal customers are being displaced for people who obviously can't afford these seats under normal circumstances. There are programs, you know, diversity initiatives, ways for airlines to paper over their passenger manifests to look more inclusive." The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Every passenger in first class was now openly staring. Elena's live stream viewership had passed 100,000. Brandon had started a second camera angle from his phone. Victoria's expression remained perfectly composed, but something had shifted in her posture. She looked less like a passenger trying to resolve a misunderstanding and more like a CEO preparing to deliver consequences. Captain Walsh Victoria said, her voice carrying a new edge of authority. "I think our private conversation has become unnecessary, Mrs. Richardson has made her position quite clear, and I believe everyone on this aircraft now understands exactly what kind of situation we're dealing with." Captain Walsh nodded grimly. He'd been flying commercial aircraft for 2 decades, and he'd seen passenger conflicts escalate before. But he'd never seen anything quite like this, and the business card in his hand suggested this was about to become more complicated than a simple seating dispute. "Mrs. Richardson," he said formally, "your behavior is creating a disruption for other passengers and crew. You have 30 seconds to take your assigned seats, or you and your husband will be removed from this aircraft." "You can't remove us," Amanda shot back. "We've done nothing wrong. We're simply asking for the seats we booked." "You booked seats 3A and 3B, Sarah interjected, "which are available and waiting for you. And we're asking you to sit in them," Carmen added. Amanda looked around the cabin, seeming to notice for the first time that every passenger was watching her, many with phones out and recording. The attention seemed to fluster her, but instead of backing down, she doubled down on her position. "Fine," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of first class. "If this airline wants to prioritize political correctness over loyal customers, then maybe it's time for loyal customers to take their business elsewhere." She grabbed her purse and looked directly at Victoria. "I hope you enjoy your stolen seat. Just remember that some of us actually earned our way here." It was the final insult delivered with maximum venom and heard by everyone on the aircraft. Victoria smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the kind of smile corporate executives wore when they were about to deliver news that would change everything for everyone involved. "Mrs. Richardson," Victoria said, her voice carrying clearly throughout first class, "you're absolutely right about one thing. Some of us did earn our way here." She turned to Captain Walsh and handed him a second business card. "Captain, I think it's time to make those phone calls we discussed." Captain Walsh looked at the card, then back at Victoria, and nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." "I think you're absolutely right." Amanda was still standing in the aisle, confused by the exchange, but pleased that she'd apparently had the last word. Richard was tugging at her sleeve, trying to guide her toward row 3, but she resisted. "What phone calls?" she asked suspiciously. Victoria looked at her with the kind of expression usually reserved for competitors who didn't understand they'd already lost. "The kind that are about to change your day considerably, Mrs. Richardson." Captain Walsh stepped into the galley with Victoria, while Sarah and Carmen remained in the cabin to manage increasingly curious passengers. The conversation was brief but intense, conducted in low voices that nonetheless carried an unmistakable sense of urgency. Amanda, meanwhile, had positioned herself in the aisle between rows 1 and 3, refusing to fully commit to either location. She was watching the galley conference with growing suspicion while Richard continued to plead with her to simply take their assigned seats. "Amanda, please," Richard whispered urgently. "Just look at your phone. Google Phoenix Technologies. Look at what I've been trying to show you." "I don't need to Google anything," Amanda replied dismissively. "I know exactly what's happening here. Airlines have quotas now. Diversity requirements. They bump paying customers to make room for people who fit whatever image they're trying to project." Elena Vasquez, still recording from her seat, leaned forward to catch every word. Her follower count had exploded as people shared her live coverage across multiple platforms. The hashtag Flight447 was now trending nationally, with thousands of people commenting on the unfolding drama. Brandon had switched to his professional-grade camera and was providing running commentary to his audience. "What you're seeing here is privilege meeting reality in real time. This woman has no idea what's about to happen to her." The comments on his feed were moving so fast they were impossible to read, but the engagement numbers showed nearly 200,000 viewers across all platforms. People were sharing the streams, creating reaction videos, and posting commentary faster than social media algorithms could track. Victoria emerged from the galley with Captain Walsh, and their expressions suggested the conversation had been significant. Captain Walsh was now treating Victoria with the kind of deference usually reserved for airline executives or federal aviation officials. "Mrs. Richardson," Captain Walsh said, his voice carrying new authority. "I need you to take your seat immediately. We have a situation that requires immediate attention." "What kind of situation?" Amanda demanded. "The only situation here is your computer error and this passenger who's obviously scamming the system." Victoria pulled out her phone and dialed a number. The call connected immediately. "Michael." "It's Victoria again." "Yes, we discussed the Skyline contract. I need you to conference in legal." "And Michael, pull the passenger discrimination clause from Section 12 of our service agreement. We're about to have a very specific conversation about brand protection." Amanda looked puzzled, but Richard's phone had been buzzing constantly, and his face suggested he was beginning to understand something his wife had missed entirely. "Victoria," Richard said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Victoria Brooks." "Phoenix Technologies." Amanda looked at him blankly. "What are you talking about?" "The Forbes list." Richard continued, his voice growing stronger as pieces fell into place. "Most powerful women in tech. Phoenix Technologies just signed the largest software contract in aviation history." So Amanda replied, though her confidence was beginning to waver. So Richard said slowly, "Phoenix Technologies owns Skyline Airlines' entire computer system, their reservation platform, their passenger management system, their crew scheduling software. Everything." The implication hung in the air like a storm cloud, but Amanda was still too proud and angry to fully grasp what her husband was telling her. Victoria's phone conversation continued, her voice professional, but carrying unmistakable authority. "That's correct. Discrimination incident on Flight 447. Yes, I'm on the aircraft. No, I don't think this can be resolved through normal customer service channels." Captain Walsh approached the Richardsons, his expression grim. "Mr. and Mrs. Richardson, I strongly advise you to take your assigned seats immediately." "Why?" Amanda asked defiantly. "What's changed in the last 5 minutes? This is still the same computer error, the same confusion about seating assignments." Elena's camera captured the moment when understanding finally began to dawn on Amanda's face. She was looking at Victoria, really looking at her for the first time since the confrontation began. Victoria was not dressed like someone using airline points for an upgrade. Her navy blazer was perfectly tailored, her shoes were Italian leather, and her watch was a Patek Philippe that cost more than most people's cars. Her posture was that of someone accustomed to command, and her phone conversation suggested she was talking to people who treated her opinions as instructions. "Who are you?" Amanda asked quietly. Victoria finished her call and looked at Amanda with the kind of expression that suggested the question was several minutes too late. "I'm Victoria Brooks," she said simply. "I'm the founder and CEO of Phoenix Technologies." The silence that followed was profound. Even the ambient aircraft noise seemed to fade as the full implications of Victoria's identity settled over first class. "Phoenix Technologies," Amanda repeated slowly as if testing the words. "The company that designed and manages Skyline Airlines' entire passenger service platform," Victoria continued, "including the system that confirmed my seat in 1A, verified my platinum status, and logged every word of our conversation for quality control purposes." Amanda's face went white. The color drained so quickly that Richard reached out to steady her. That's impossible," she stammered. "You're—" She stopped herself before completing the sentence, but everyone knew what she'd been about to say. "I'm what Victoria asked." The question forced Amanda to confront the assumptions that had driven her behavior for the past 15 minutes. She'd seen a black woman in first class and assumed fraud, assumed deception, assumed impossibility. She'd never considered that the woman standing before her might be one of the most powerful people in the aviation industry. Captain Walsh stepped forward. Mrs. Richardson, Ms. Brooks, owns the company that Skyline Airlines pays $2.1 billion annually for computer services. She doesn't need to steal airline seats. She could purchase the aircraft. The mathematics of the situation were staggering. Amanda had accused a multi-billionaire of ticket fraud. She'd suggested that one of Forbes's most powerful women had scammed her way into first class. She'd demanded that airline employees verify the credentials of someone whose company basically ran the airline. "I didn't know," Amanda said weakly. "No," Victoria replied, "you didn't. But you also didn't ask. You made assumptions based on what you saw, and those assumptions led you to treat me with contempt, disrespect, and thinly veiled racism." The word hung in the air like an indictment. Amanda had spent 15 minutes dancing around the implications of her behavior, but Victoria had named it directly. Brandon's live stream audience had grown to over 300,000 viewers. Comments were flooding in from around the world as people shared the footage and discussed the confrontation. The story was jumping from social media to news outlets in real time. "I'm not racist," Amanda protested weakly. "I was just trying to protect our seats," from what Victoria asked. "From someone who had a confirmed reservation and valid boarding pass. From someone with higher airline status than you. From someone who's been flying first class longer than you've been married." Each question landed like a blow. Amanda had no answers because there were no answers. Her behavior had been based entirely on prejudice and assumption, and now those assumptions were crumbling in the face of reality. Richard had been silent through this exchange, but now he spoke up. "Ms. Brooks, I apologize for my wife's behavior. We'll move to our assigned seats immediately." "It's too late for that," Victoria replied. "This stopped being about seats 10 minutes ago." She turned to Captain Walsh. "Have you reached ground control?" "They're standing by," he confirmed. "And legal conference call in 2 minutes." Amanda looked between Victoria and Captain Walsh with growing panic. "What legal call? What are you talking about?" Victoria's phone rang. She looked at the screen and nodded to Captain Walsh. "It's time." She answered the call and put it on speaker. "This is Victoria Brooks. Ms. Brooks, this is Jennifer Martinez, General Counsel for Skyline Airlines. We've been briefed on the situation. Are you safe and unharmed?" "I am," Victoria replied. "Though I've been subjected to approximately 15 minutes of discriminatory treatment, public humiliation, and accusations of fraud by one of your passengers. We're prepared to offer immediate remediation," the attorney replied. "What outcome would you consider appropriate?" Amanda listened to this exchange with growing horror. The airline's legal department was treating Victoria like a VIP victim of discrimination, not a complaining passenger. They were asking her what she wanted done, not trying to minimize her concerns. "I want a comprehensive review of passenger service protocols," Victoria said. "I want incident documentation that will prevent this from happening to other passengers. And I want Mrs. Richardson to understand that actions have consequences." "Understood. We're implementing immediate changes to crew training and passenger service guidelines." "Regarding Mrs. Richardson," Victoria looked directly at Amanda. "Mrs. Richardson has made her position clear. She believes some passengers deserve first-class service and others don't. She's questioned my right to be here, my ability to afford this seat, and the legitimacy of my reservation. I think she should experience what it feels like when someone questions her right to be somewhere." "Ms. Brooks." Captain Walsh interjected. "Are you requesting that the Richardsons be removed from the flight?" Victoria was quiet for a moment, considering. The power to destroy Amanda's day, maybe Amanda's year, was entirely in her hands. She could have the couple banned from Skyline Airlines, or removed from the flight, or subjected to the kind of public humiliation Amanda had tried to inflict on her. Instead, she chose something more powerful. "No," Victoria said finally. "I want Mrs. Richardson to complete this flight. I want her to sit in her assigned seat and think about what just happened. I want her to consider how she treats people she doesn't immediately recognize. And I want her to remember that dignity isn't determined by race or appearance or assumption. She turned to Amanda directly. Mrs. Richardson, you have 60 seconds to voluntarily move to your assigned seat before this situation becomes permanently documented in ways that will follow you forever. The threat was delivered quietly, but the implications were clear. Social media had already captured most of the confrontation. News outlets would pick up the story within hours. Amanda's name and face would be associated with airline discrimination for the foreseeable future, unless she chose to end this now. Amanda looked around first class one last time, seeing her audience clearly for the first time. Dozens of passengers with phones out recording her humiliation. A CEO who could destroy her family's reputation with a phone call. Airline employees who now saw her as a liability rather than a customer. Come on, Richard, she said quietly. Let's go to our seats. But Victoria wasn't finished yet. Mrs. Richardson, she called out as Amanda began gathering her things. One more thing. Amanda turned and Victoria smiled. Not the pleasant smile of customer service, but the confident smile of someone who owned the game board. Welcome aboard. Amanda and Richard moved slowly toward row 3, their earlier confidence replaced by shell-shocked confusion. Other passengers watched their walk of shame with mixtures of satisfaction, discomfort, and fascination. Elena continued recording, documenting what had become one of the most dramatic reversals of fortune ever captured on an aircraft. But Victoria wasn't finished. As the Richardsons settled into their actual seats, she remained standing in the aisle, her phone still connected to the Skyline Airlines legal department. Jennifer Victoria said into the phone, I want to discuss the broader implications of what just happened here. Of course, Ms. Brooks. How can we address your concerns? Captain Walsh looked at Victoria with growing apprehension. He was beginning to understand that this incident was expanding beyond simple passenger service into something that could affect airline operations on a much larger scale. This wasn't an isolated incident. Victoria continued. Your passenger service representative automatically assumed I was committing fraud. Your crew initially supported a passenger who was clearly engaged in discriminatory behavior, and your computer systems apparently allowed someone to publicly question my reservation without any verification of their complaint. The legal representative's voice became more formal. What are you suggesting, Ms. Brooks? I'm suggesting that Phoenix Technologies' passenger service software includes comprehensive logging capabilities that I specifically designed to identify and prevent exactly this kind of discrimination. Every word of this conversation has been recorded through multiple channels. Every passenger interaction is documented, and every crew response is logged for review. Amanda, overhearing this from row 3, felt her stomach drop. Richard, she whispered. Everything we said is recorded. Richard, who had spent 30 years in financial services and understood the implications of comprehensive data logging, closed his eyes. Everything he confirmed. Victoria's voice carried clearly throughout first class. Jennifer, I want you to pull the complete passenger interaction file for Flight 447. Review every conversation, every crew response, and every decision point where this situation could have been resolved differently. We can have that analysis completed within 24 hours, the legal representative replied. You have 2 hours, Victoria corrected. Because I'm calling an emergency board meeting with Skyline Airlines leadership to discuss whether Phoenix Technologies should continue our partnership with a carrier that allows passengers to publicly abuse other passengers based on race. The threat was delivered with corporate precision, but its implications were staggering. Phoenix Technologies wasn't just a software vendor to Skyline Airlines. They were essential infrastructure. Losing their partnership would cripple Skyline's operations and cost billions in replacement systems. Captain Walsh stepped forward. Miss Brooks, perhaps we should continue this conversation privately. No, Victoria replied firmly. This conversation started publicly with Mrs. Richardson announcing her opinions about who belongs in first class to everyone on this aircraft. I think it's appropriate that the resolution be equally public. She turned to address the passengers directly, most of whom were still recording with their phones. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to understand what you've witnessed here today. Mrs. Richardson didn't just make assumptions about me personally. She made assumptions about an entire category of people. She decided that black passengers in first class must be fraudulent, upgraded, or somehow undeserving of the seats they purchased. Brandon's live stream audience had grown to over 500,000 viewers as news outlets picked up the feed and social media amplified the content. Comments were flooding in from viewers around the world, many sharing their own experiences with travel discrimination. But here's what Mrs. Richardson didn't understand. Victoria continued. Those assumptions don't just hurt individual passengers. They represent a failure of corporate culture training protocols and service standards that affects every person who doesn't fit someone's narrow definition of deserving. Elena, still recording, was creating what would become the definitive documentation of the incident. Her footage would be replayed on news programs, analyzed by diversity experts, and studied in business schools as an example of how discrimination incidents could escalate when not properly addressed. Victoria's phone conversation continued. Jennifer, I want immediate changes to crew training protocols. Any passenger complaint about seating should be verified through documentation before crew members take any action. And I want specific language in your service standards that discriminatory behavior by passengers toward other passengers will result in immediate removal from the aircraft. We can implement those changes across our entire fleet, the legal representative confirmed. Within 72 hours, Victoria added, and I want public announcement of these policy changes with specific reference to this incident as the catalyst for improved service standards. Amanda, listening from row 3, understood that her public humiliation was about to become a case study in airline discrimination. Her name would be associated with policy changes across the entire Skyline Airlines system. But Victoria still wasn't finished. There's one more thing, Jennifer. I want a comprehensive review of passenger complaints over the past 12 months. How many black passengers have been questioned about their seat assignments? How many have been asked to provide additional verification? How many have been assumed to be fraudulent or upgraded rather than paying customers? The questions revealed the sophisticated thinking that had made Victoria one of the most successful technology entrepreneurs of her generation. She wasn't just addressing her personal experience, she was using data analysis to identify patterns of discrimination that might otherwise remain hidden. We can provide that analysis, Jennifer replied, though her voice suggested she was concerned about what the review might reveal. Good, because Phoenix Technologies specializes in pattern recognition and bias detection. If there's widespread discrimination in Skyline's passenger service, our algorithms will identify it. Captain Walsh was now openly concerned. Ms. Brooks, are you suggesting we delay this flight to conduct a review? Victoria looked at him with the kind of expression that suggested he'd asked exactly the right question. Captain Walsh, how long does it take to run a comprehensive passenger service analysis? I wouldn't know, he admitted. 18 minutes, Victoria replied. Our AI can process 12 months of passenger interaction data in 18 minutes. Would you like me to run that analysis now? The offer was delivered like a challenge. Captain Walsh understood that Victoria was giving him a choice: address this incident properly or watch it escalate into a comprehensive review of airline discrimination practices in real time. What would that analysis involve? He asked carefully. Everything, Victoria replied. Every passenger complaint, every seating dispute, every request for verification. Cross-referenced by race, gender, age, and passenger status. Pattern analysis that identifies crew members who consistently question certain categories of passengers. Route analysis that shows which flights have higher rates of discrimination incidents. The scope of the proposed analysis was breathtaking. Victoria wasn't just threatening to expose discriminatory behavior on Flight 447, she was offering to reveal discrimination patterns across Skyline Airlines' entire operation. Brandon, still live streaming, provided commentary to his audience. She's not just fighting for her seat anymore. She's about to audit the entire airline for discrimination. This is next-level corporate warfare. Richard, who understood data analysis from his financial background, leaned over to Amanda. "She could destroy this airline," he whispered. "If there are patterns of discrimination in their data, she could expose everything." Amanda looked around the cabin, finally understanding the magnitude of what she'd triggered. She'd started a simple argument about seat assignments and somehow escalated it into a potential corporate crisis that could affect thousands of jobs and millions of dollars in airline operations. Jennifer Victoria continued into her phone. "I want you to conference in Skyline's CEO. This conversation requires executive decision-making. Robert Chen is available immediately," Jennifer replied. "Connecting now." A new voice joined the call. "Ms. Brooks, this is Robert Chen, Chief Executive Officer of Skyline Airlines. I've been briefed on the situation, and I want to personally apologize for what you've experienced." Mr. Chen Victoria replied. "Apologies don't interest me. Policy changes do." "What are you proposing?" "Complete revision of passenger service protocols, mandatory bias training for all customer-facing employees, and implementation of Phoenix Technologies' discrimination detection algorithms across your entire passenger service platform." The silence that followed suggested Robert Chen was calculating the cost and implications of Victoria's demands. Those changes would affect every employee and every flight operation, he said finally. "Yes," Victoria agreed. "Because discrimination affects every passenger who doesn't fit certain assumptions." Elena, still recording, whispered to the passenger next to her. "She's negotiating airline policy in real time. This is incredible." The passenger, David Kim, nodded. "She's not just a victim anymore. She's driving corporate change from seat 1A. Victoria's voice carried clearly throughout first class as she continued her conversation with the Skyline CEO. "Mr. Chen, Phoenix Technologies has been Skyline's technology partner for 3 years. Our software platforms power your reservations, manage your crew scheduling, and process your passenger services. In that time, has anyone ever questioned my company's right to those contracts?" "Of course not," Chen replied immediately. "Has anyone ever suggested that Phoenix Technologies might be fraudulent or undeserving or accessing those contracts through alternative means?" "Absolutely not. Then why is it acceptable for your passengers to question my right to a seat I purchased legitimately?" The question struck at the heart of the matter. Victoria had identified the contradiction that made this incident so egregious. She was treated as completely legitimate in business settings but questioned in consumer settings, and the only variable was context and assumptions. "It's not acceptable," Chen admitted. "And we're committed to ensuring it doesn't happen again." "Good," Victoria replied. "Then you'll implement the changes I've outlined." "We will," Chen confirmed. "All of them." Captain Walsh had been listening to this exchange with growing amazement. In 30 years of flying, he'd never seen a passenger negotiate corporate policy changes in real time. But he was also becoming concerned about flight operations. "Ms. Brooks," he interjected, "these are significant policy discussions. Perhaps they should continue after we land." Victoria looked at him with an expression that suggested he'd misunderstood the situation entirely. "Captain Walsh," she said quietly, "this aircraft doesn't move until this is resolved. Because if it takes off with current Skyline passenger service policies in place, I'll have to recommend that Phoenix Technologies terminate our partnership immediately." The threat was delivered calmly, but its implications were clear. Losing Phoenix Technologies would cripple Skyline Airlines' operations. Robert Chen understood this. Captain Walsh understood this, and increasingly, Amanda Richardson understood this. "How long do you need?" Captain Walsh asked. "As long as it takes," Victoria replied. And with that, Flight 447 was officially grounded. The announcement that Flight 447 would be delayed indefinitely sent ripples of reaction throughout the aircraft. Initially, passengers assumed it was a mechanical issue or weather-related hold. But Elena's continued live streaming and Brandon's growing audience meant that hundreds of thousands of viewers already understood the real reason for the delay. "Ladies and gentlemen," came Captain Walsh's voice over the intercom, "we're experiencing an operational delay and will remain at the gate until further notice. We apologize for any inconvenience and will provide updates as they become available." The carefully neutral language fooled no one in first class, where passengers had witnessed the entire confrontation. What started as a seating dispute had escalated into a corporate negotiation that was now affecting airline operations. Elena looked directly into her camera, addressing her rapidly growing audience. "What you're watching is unprecedented. A discrimination incident has just grounded a commercial aircraft because the victim happens to be one of the most powerful people in the aviation industry." Her viewer count had exploded past 200,000 as news outlets picked up her feed and social media algorithms amplified the content. The hashtag Flight447 was trending nationally, joined by Victoria Brooks' airline discrimination and increasingly Amanda Richardson. Brandon, streaming from his second angle, provided running commentary. This is what accountability looks like in real time. Every passenger with a phone is documenting this, and there's no way to spin what happened here. The comments on both streams were moving faster than anyone could read, but certain themes emerged clearly. Finally, someone with actual power fighting back against racism. Amanda Richardson is about to become the most famous Karen in America. This CEO is not playing games. That woman messed with the wrong person. Justice being served at 30,000 feet. But the story was spreading beyond social media. News producers at major networks had picked up the live streams and were scrambling to cover the developing story. The combination of racial discrimination, corporate power, and airline operations created exactly the kind of multi-layered narrative that captured public attention. Amanda, seated in row 3, was frantically trying to understand how her life had imploded in the span of 20 minutes. She pulled out her own phone and searched for her name, discovering to her horror that Amanda Richardson was already trending with thousands of negative comments. "Richard," she whispered desperately. "People are posting our names, our photos, everything. How did this happen so fast?" Richard, who had been following the social media explosion with growing dread, showed her his phone screen. "Amanda, there are already news articles being published. Your picture is on Twitter with 500,000 retweets." The speed of modern information dissemination meant that Amanda's racist behavior was being documented, analyzed, and condemned by millions of people in real time. Her face was becoming synonymous with airline discrimination, and the story was spreading globally. Meanwhile, Victoria's phone conversation with Skyline Airlines' executive team continued, but now it had expanded to include multiple departments and stakeholders. Robert Victoria said, addressing the CEO directly, "I want you to understand the broader implications of what's happening here. This isn't just about one incident or one passenger. This is about a culture that allows discrimination to flourish because it's rarely challenged by people with actual power." "I understand completely," Robert Chen replied, his voice suggesting he was fully aware of the crisis this incident could create for his company. "Do you?" Victoria asked. "Because I have 18 months of passenger interaction data from your airline. Phoenix Technologies software logs every customer service interaction, every complaint resolution, and every crew response. If I analyze that data for discriminatory patterns, what do you think I'll find?" The question created a moment of silence on the call that spoke volumes about Skyline's confidence in their service record. "We would welcome that analysis," Chen said carefully, "as part of our commitment to improving passenger services." "Excellent," Victoria replied, "because I've already started running it. She pulled out her laptop and opened a secure connection to Phoenix Technologies' data analysis platform. The screen displayed real-time processing of Skyline Airlines passenger service data with algorithms specifically designed to identify bias patterns. Passengers seated near Victoria could see the data streaming across her screen charts, graphs, and analyses that revealed patterns of discriminatory behavior across Skyline's entire operation. Elena, still recording, managed to capture a glimpse of the laptop screen. "She's literally analyzing the entire airline for discrimination while we sit here," she narrated to her audience. "This is like watching corporate investigation happen live." The preliminary results were damning. Phoenix Technologies' bias detection algorithms identified clear patterns of differential treatment based on race, age, and gender across Skyline's passenger service interactions. Victoria said into her phone, "Are you ready for the preliminary findings?" "Go ahead," Chen replied, though his voice suggested he was dreading what he was about to hear. Black passengers are 47% more likely to have their seat assignments questioned by crew members. They're 62% more likely to be asked for additional identification, and they're 3 times more likely to have customer complaints dismissed without investigation. The statistics fell like hammer blows. Each number represented hundreds of passengers who had experienced exactly what Victoria had just gone through, but without her resources to fight back. Hispanic passengers show similar patterns. Victoria continued. Asian passengers are more likely to have their English proficiency questioned, and women traveling alone are consistently subjected to different security protocols than male passengers. Brandon's live stream audience had grown to nearly 1 million viewers as people shared the feed and news outlets embedded the coverage in their websites. The combination of live discrimination data analysis and real-time corporate accountability was unprecedented. "This is history," Brandon told his audience. "We're watching bias being exposed with actual data in real time." The comments on his stream reflected the global nature of the audience. Same discrimination happens on European airlines. Finally, someone with power is fighting back. This data should be public for all airlines. Amanda Richardson just exposed an entire industry. But Amanda Richardson wasn't thinking about industry implications. She was focused on the personal catastrophe unfolding around her. Her phone was buzzing constantly with notifications, friends, family members, and colleagues sending her links to news articles and social media posts about her behavior. "Richard," she whispered, "my sister just sent me a link to the Daily Mail. They have our photos and everything." Richard looked at his own phone, which showed missed calls from their country club, their financial advisor, and multiple business associates. "Amanda, this is on CNN now. They're calling it the Flight 447 discrimination incident." The realization that their lives had become a global news story was devastating. Amanda had started the day as an anonymous wealthy passenger and was ending it as the face of airline racism. Victoria, meanwhile, had finished her data analysis and was ready to present her findings to Skyline's leadership team. "Robert," she said into her phone, "the data analysis is complete. Would you like me to share these findings publicly?" The threat was clear. Victoria could release comprehensive documentation of Skyline Airlines' discriminatory patterns, turning Amanda's individual incident into evidence of widespread institutional bias. "What would you require for that analysis to remain confidential?" Chen asked. "Complete policy revision, mandatory bias training for all staff, implementation of real-time discrimination monitoring, and public acknowledgement that this incident revealed serious flaws in passenger service protocols." The demands were comprehensive and non-negotiable. Victoria wasn't just seeking resolution for her personal experience. She was leveraging her position to force industry-wide change. Elena, still streaming, addressed her audience directly. "What you're seeing is someone using corporate power to fight discrimination in real time. This isn't just about getting an apology. This is about changing how airlines treat passengers." Her analysis resonated with viewers, and comments flooded in, supporting Victoria's approach. Use that power to help everyone. Make them pay for their racism. This is how change really happens. Finally, someone fighting back with actual leverage. The passenger in seat 4A, a woman named Patricia Gonzalez who worked in corporate diversity consulting, spoke up loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I've been analyzing workplace bias for 10 years, and I've never seen anything like this." She's conducting a real-time audit of an entire airline's discrimination practices. Her professional perspective added credibility to what passengers were witnessing. This wasn't just a passenger complaint, it was a comprehensive investigation of institutional bias using sophisticated data analysis tools. Captain Walsh, who had been monitoring the situation with growing concern about flight operations, approached Victoria again. "Ms. Brooks," he said quietly, "how much longer do you anticipate these negotiations will take?" Victoria looked up from her laptop where additional data analyses were still running. "Captain, how long would it normally take Skyline Airlines to implement company-wide policy changes?" "Months," he admitted. "Then I suggest you prepare for an extended delay," Victoria replied. "Because this aircraft doesn't move until every passenger on board can be confident they'll be treated with dignity and respect." The statement was heard throughout first class and captured on multiple live streams. Victoria had essentially announced that she was holding Flight 447 hostage until the airline agreed to comprehensive anti-discrimination reforms. Amanda, overhearing this, finally understood the full magnitude of what her behavior had triggered. Her simple assumption about seat assignments had escalated into a corporate crisis that was affecting hundreds of passengers and potentially thousands of airline employees. "Richard," she whispered, "she's going to destroy the entire airline because of what I said." Richard, who had been reading news coverage on his phone, looked up with an expression of complete defeat. "Amanda, she's not destroying anything. She's exposing what was already broken." The distinction was crucial. Victoria wasn't creating a crisis, she was revealing one that had existed all along, hidden in passenger service data and individual experiences of discrimination. But for Amanda Richardson, that distinction offered little comfort as she watched her private prejudices become a global symbol of everything wrong with airline customer service. The social media explosion continued, with Flight 447 generating more engagement than major sporting events. People around the world were watching corporate accountability happen in real time, and the story was resonating far beyond the aviation industry. Victoria's phone rang again. This time it was her assistant at Phoenix Technologies. "Victoria," came the voice through the speaker, "you need to see the media coverage. This story is everywhere. CNN, Fox, BBC, Al Jazeera. Everyone is covering this, and your phone hasn't stopped ringing. Interview requests from every major network." Victoria smiled. "Tell them I'm in a meeting, a very important meeting about airline passenger service standards." She looked around first class, taking in the dozens of passengers who were documenting every word for social media posterity. "And tell them the meeting isn't over yet." The formal announcement came 47 minutes after the initial seating confrontation. Captain Walsh's voice crackled through the aircraft's intercom system with the kind of strained professionalism that suggested he was delivering news he'd never expected to announce. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Flight 447 will be returning to the gate due to an operational matter requiring immediate attention. We apologize for this disruption and will provide updated departure information as it becomes available." The careful language masked the unprecedented reality a commercial aircraft had been grounded because its most valuable passenger had been subjected to racist treatment by another passenger, and the situation had escalated into real-time corporate policy negotiations. Elena, still live-streaming to her audience of nearly 300,000 viewers, provided immediate context. "What the captain isn't telling you is that this plane is grounded because Victoria Brooks is currently rewriting Skyline Airlines' discrimination policies from seat 1A. Her analysis sparked a new wave of social media engagement. The hashtag Flight447Grounded joined Victoria Brooks and Amanda Richardson in trending topics, with users around the world discussing the implications of corporate power being used to fight discrimination. The immediate consequences began cascading through multiple channels simultaneously. At Skyline Airlines headquarters in Dallas, emergency meetings were being called as executives realized that their most important technology partner was conducting a public audit of their passenger service practices. Robert Chen, still on the conference call with Victoria, was coordinating with his legal team, human resources department, and public relations staff to address what had become a full-scale corporate crisis. Ms. Brooks Chen said, his voice carrying the weight of someone managing multiple critical decisions. Simultaneously, we're prepared to implement immediate changes to our passenger service protocols. What specific modifications would satisfy your concerns? Victoria had finished her comprehensive data analysis and was now presenting findings that revealed patterns of discrimination across Skyline's entire operation. Her laptop screen displayed statistics that would have been impossible to compile without Phoenix Technologies' sophisticated bias detection algorithms. Robert, your airline has documented discrimination incidents affecting approximately 12,000 passengers over the past 18 months. Black passengers account for 67% of verification requests, despite representing only 22% of first-class travelers. The statistics were devastating. Each number represented real passengers who had been subjected to the same treatment Victoria had experienced, but without her resources to demand accountability. Asian passengers are consistently questioned about their ability to understand safety instructions in English. Victoria continued. Hispanic passengers are more likely to have their identification scrutinized, and women traveling alone face different baggage inspection protocols than men. Elena captured every word for her streaming audience, which had grown to include viewers from 37 countries as international news outlets embedded her feed in their coverage. This is real-time corporate accountability, she narrated. She's not just complaining about her treatment, she's exposing institutional patterns of discrimination using actual data. The implications extended far beyond Skyline Airlines. Other carriers were monitoring the situation, understanding that Phoenix Technologies' bias detection capabilities could be applied to their operations as well. Amanda Richardson, still seated in row 3, was experiencing the personal consequences of the broader crisis she had triggered. Her phone showed hundreds of social media mentions, most accompanied by screenshots of her confrontation with Victoria. The speed of modern information dissemination meant that her racist behavior was being analyzed by diversity experts, condemned by civil rights leaders, and used as a case study in corporate training programs, all while she sat trapped on the aircraft that had become ground zero for a national conversation about discrimination. "Richard," she whispered desperately, "the Richardson Properties website is down. Our phone system crashed from all the calls. What are we going to do?" Richard, whose own business relationships were being affected by their association with the incident, could only shake his head. "We're going to have to figure out how to rebuild our entire reputation." The social media storm had reached the point where Amanda Richardson was generating more engagement than major celebrity news. Her behavior was being dissected by millions of people who were sharing their own experiences with travel discrimination and workplace bias. But the story was evolving beyond individual consequences into broader corporate accountability. Victoria's real-time data analysis had revealed discrimination patterns that affected thousands of passengers, and her position as Phoenix Technologies' CEO gave her unprecedented leverage to demand changes. Robert, Victoria continued her conversation with Skyline's CEO. "I want comprehensive policy revisions implemented within 72 hours. Mandatory bias training for all customer-facing employees within 30 days, and real-time discrimination monitoring using Phoenix Technologies' algorithms." The scope of those changes would affect our entire operation, Chen replied carefully. "Yes," Victoria agreed. "Because discrimination affects your entire passenger base." Captain Walsh, monitoring the situation from the cockpit, was receiving updates from ground control about the unprecedented nature of the delay. Air traffic controllers had never dealt with an aircraft grounded due to passenger discrimination negotiations. "Ground control to Skyline 447," came the radio communication. What's your estimated time for resolving operational issues? Captain Walsh looked toward first class, where Victoria was still conducting her corporate negotiations. Ground control were dealing with a passenger service matter that requires executive-level resolution. Unknown timeline. The response sparked curiosity among other pilots monitoring the frequency. Word spread through aviation circles that Flight 447 was grounded due to a discrimination incident involving a high-profile passenger. Brandon, still streaming to his massive audience, provided regular updates. We're now approaching 1 hour of delay while this CEO negotiates airline policy changes. This is the most expensive discrimination incident in aviation history. His analysis resonated with viewers who were following the financial implications of the grounding. Every minute of delay cost Skyline Airlines thousands of dollars in operations crew overtime and passenger compensation. But Victoria was focused on long-term change rather than immediate costs. Her data analysis had revealed that discrimination wasn't an aberration in airline service, it was a predictable pattern that could be measured, tracked, and corrected with proper policies. Jennifer Victoria addressed Skyline's legal counsel. I want specific language in passenger service protocols that discriminatory behavior by passengers toward other passengers will result in immediate removal from the aircraft. We can implement that policy immediately, Jennifer replied. And I want crew training that emphasizes verification through documentation rather than assumption. No passenger should be questioned about their seat assignment without reviewing their boarding pass and reservation confirmation first. Understood. Most importantly, Victoria continued, I want public acknowledgement that this incident revealed serious flaws in Skyline's passenger service culture and that the airline is committed to comprehensive reform. The demand for public acknowledgement meant that Skyline Airlines would have to own the discrimination patterns Victoria had identified rather than treating the incident as an isolated event. Elena, still recording, addressed her global audience. She's not just seeking personal compensation, she's forcing an entire airline to confront institutional bias and implement comprehensive changes. The complexity of Victoria's approach impressed viewers who understood that most discrimination incidents ended with apologies and minimal policy adjustments. Victoria was using her corporate leverage to demand fundamental changes to airline culture. Patricia Gonzalez, the diversity consultant in Seat 4A, spoke up again. What she's accomplishing here would normally require federal lawsuits and years of litigation. She's achieving comprehensive corporate reform in real time. Her professional perspective helped passengers understand the significance of what they were witnessing. Victoria wasn't just exercising personal power, she was demonstrating how discrimination could be addressed when victims had sufficient leverage to demand accountability. The phone conference with Skyline's executive team expanded to include additional stakeholders as the airline recognized the scope of changes Victoria was demanding. Human resources directors, training managers, and policy specialists joined the call to discuss implementation timelines. Ms. Brooks, came a new voice on the call. This is Sarah Williams, Skyline's Director of Human Resources. The training protocols you've outlined would require comprehensive revision of our employee education programs. How long would that normally take? Victoria asked. 6 to 9 months for full implementation. You have 30 days, Victoria replied firmly. Phoenix Technologies can provide bias detection training modules that integrate with your existing platforms. The technology exists, you just need the commitment to use it. The conversation revealed Victoria's sophisticated understanding of corporate change management. She wasn't just identifying problems, she was providing specific solutions that could be implemented using existing resources. Amanda, listening to these negotiations from row 3, finally understood that her behavior had triggered far more than personal consequences. She had accidentally catalyzed a comprehensive review of airline discrimination practices that would affect millions of future passengers. "Richard?" she whispered. "She's going to change how every airline treats passengers because of what I said." The realization that her racist assumptions had become the catalyst for industry-wide reform was perhaps the most devastating consequence of all. Amanda had tried to put Victoria in her place and instead had given Victoria a platform to transform the entire aviation industry. But Victoria wasn't finished yet. Her laptop showed additional data analyses still running, revealing discrimination patterns across multiple airlines that used Phoenix Technologies' software platforms. "Robert," she said to Skyline's CEO, "there's one more thing we need to discuss." The phrase sent another chill through the passenger cabin and the corporate conference call. After nearly an hour of comprehensive policy negotiations, Victoria apparently had additional demands. "What is it?" Chen asked carefully. Victoria smiled, the expression visible to passengers throughout first class who were still documenting every moment. "I want to discuss Amanda Richardson's lifetime travel privileges." The mention of Amanda Richardson's name in the corporate negotiations sent a visible shock through the aircraft cabin. Amanda herself went pale, understanding that her personal consequences were about to be determined by the CEO she had tried to humiliate. Victoria continued her conversation with Skyline's executive team, her voice carrying clearly throughout first class, where dozens of passengers were still recording every word for social media posterity. Robert Victoria addressed the CEO directly. "Mrs. Richardson spent 15 minutes publicly questioning my right to be in first class based solely on my race. She suggested I had stolen my ticket, scammed the way, or received special treatment that I didn't deserve. She refused to accept verification from your crew and demanded that I be removed from the aircraft." Elena, still live streaming to an audience that had grown to over 400,000 viewers, leaned forward to capture every detail. The global audience was witnessing corporate accountability in real time, and the personal consequences for Amanda were about to be determined. "What are you proposing?" Robert Chen asked carefully. "Complete review of Mrs. Richardson's travel history with Skyline Airlines. I want to know if she's engaged in similar behavior with other passengers. I want to see how your crew has responded to her complaints in the past. And I want to understand whether this was an isolated incident or part of a pattern." The request for historical analysis struck at something Amanda had hoped would remain private. She had indeed made complaints about other passengers over the years, comments about children being too loud, elderly passengers moving too slowly, and yes, occasional questions about whether certain passengers belonged in premium cabins. Richard, who had been monitoring social media coverage on his phone, showed Amanda a tweet that had gone viral. "When keeping it racist goes wrong. Amanda Richardson vs. Victoria Brooks." The tweet included side-by-side photos, Amanda's country club headshot and Victoria's Forbes magazine cover. Amanda Richard whispered, "Your picture is everywhere. Someone found your LinkedIn, your real estate license. Everything." The digital investigation into Amanda's life had been swift and comprehensive. Social media users had identified her within hours of the initial live stream, and her professional history was being analyzed by millions of people worldwide. Victoria's laptop showed the results of Phoenix Technologies' analysis of Amanda's travel history. The data revealed a pattern of complaints and special requests that painted a picture of someone who consistently demanded differential treatment based on her assumptions about other passengers. Robert Victoria continued. "Mrs. Richardson has filed 47 complaints about other passengers over the past 5 years. 31 of those complaints involved passengers she described as not belonging in first class. 26 of those passengers were Black, Hispanic, or Asian. The statistics were damning. Amanda's behavior toward Victoria wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a documented pattern of discriminatory assumptions about who deserved premium airline services." Brandon, streaming from his second camera angle, provided commentary to his massive audience. "The data shows this wasn't random racism. It was habitual racism. She's been doing this for years." The revelation that Amanda's discriminatory behavior was deliberate rather than spontaneous added new dimensions to the story. News outlets were updating their coverage to reflect the pattern of bias rather than presenting it as a single incident. Furthermore, Victoria continued, Mrs. Richardson's complaints have resulted in 12 passengers being moved to different seats questioned by security or delayed during boarding. Your airline has been enabling discriminatory behavior for years. Elena captured Amanda's reaction as the scope of her documented discrimination was revealed. Amanda was staring at her hands, apparently understanding for the first time how her behavior looked when analyzed as data rather than isolated interactions. "What are you requesting regarding Mrs. Richardson?" Chen asked. Victoria was quiet for a moment, considering her options. She had the power to ban Amanda from Skyline Airlines permanently. She could demand public apologies, sensitivity training, or financial compensation. She could make Amanda's life extremely difficult for the foreseeable future. Instead, she chose something more powerful. "I want Mrs. Richardson to attend mandatory diversity training before she's allowed to fly first class on any airline," Victoria said. "I want her to understand how her assumptions affect other passengers. And I want her to personally apologize to every passenger she's wrongfully complained about over the past 5 years." The requirements were comprehensive and humbling, but they offered Amanda a path toward redemption rather than simple punishment. Victoria was using her leverage to create education and accountability rather than destruction. Additionally, Victoria continued, "I want Mrs. Richardson to serve 100 hours of community service with organizations that fight travel discrimination and promote aviation diversity." Amanda, listening to her consequences being determined by corporate executives and the woman she had tried to humiliate, began crying quietly. The magnitude of her situation was overwhelming. Her discriminatory behavior was being exposed globally, her travel privileges were being restricted, and her path back to respectability would require months of difficult personal work. "Mrs. Richardson came," Robert Chen's voice over the speaker. "Are you willing to accept these requirements?" Amanda looked around, first class, seeing dozens of passengers with phones still recording her response. Elena's live stream audience was waiting for her answer. Brandon's followers were watching her decide between accountability and continued consequences. Amanda's voice was barely audible. "I accept." Victoria nodded once satisfied with the response. But the corporate reckoning extended beyond individual consequences to industry-wide changes. Robert Victoria addressed Skyline's CEO again. "I want to discuss Phoenix Technologies' ongoing relationship with your airline." The statement sent another ripple of tension through the cabin. Victoria was about to determine whether her technology company would continue powering Skyline's operations, a decision worth billions of dollars and thousands of jobs. "Our contract comes up for renewal in 6 months," Victoria continued. "Whether Phoenix Technologies continues that partnership will depend entirely on Skyline's commitment to implementing the discrimination prevention measures we've discussed." The threat was delivered with corporate precision, but its implications were staggering. Losing Phoenix Technologies would cripple Skyline's operations and force the airline to rebuild their entire passenger service platform. "We're committed to every change you've outlined," Jen replied immediately. "Complete policy revision, mandatory bias training, real-time monitoring, and public acknowledgement of institutional failures." "Excellent," Victoria replied. "Because discrimination isn't just a social justice issue, it's a business efficiency issue. Bias creates customer service problems, generates negative publicity, and drives away profitable passengers." Patricia Gonzalez, the diversity consultant, listening from seat 4A, spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "She's absolutely right. Discrimination is terrible business practice, not just terrible human behavior." The professional perspective resonated with passengers who were sharing their own experiences across social media. Comments flooded in from travelers who had experienced similar discrimination but lacked Victoria's resources to fight back. Victoria's phone rang again. This time it was someone from Phoenix Technologies' Public Relations Department. Victoria came the voice through the speaker. "You need to see the media coverage. This story is now the lead on every major news network. CNN is calling it the most significant corporate discrimination incident since Starbucks. The Today Show wants an exclusive interview, and Forbes is planning a cover story about using corporate power to fight bias. Victoria looked around first class, taking in the audience that had documented her entire confrontation and negotiation. Tell them I'm not interested in interviews about the incident, but I am interested in discussing how corporate leaders can use their platforms to address institutional discrimination. The distinction was crucial. Victoria wasn't seeking personal publicity. She was using her experience to promote broader conversations about corporate accountability and bias prevention. Elena, still streaming, addressed her global audience. What you've witnessed today isn't just about airline discrimination. It's about how power can be used to create change when people are willing to take risks and demand accountability. Her analysis sparked new conversations across social media about corporate responsibility, individual privilege, and the role of technology in identifying and preventing discrimination. The phone conference with Skyline's executive team continued as details of policy implementation were finalized. Victoria's demands had evolved into a comprehensive corporate reform program that would serve as a model for other airlines. Jennifer Victoria addressed the legal counsel. I want public announcement of these policy changes within 24 hours. Full transparency about what happened on Flight 447 and how it revealed widespread problems with passenger service. We can prepare a comprehensive statement, Jennifer replied. Good, because transparency prevents repetition. When companies acknowledge their failures publicly, it creates accountability that private apologies can't achieve. The conversation revealed Victoria's sophisticated understanding of corporate change management. She wasn't just demanding individual justice, she was creating structural reforms that would prevent future discrimination. Captain Walsh, who had been monitoring the negotiations with growing amazement, approached Victoria again. Ms. Brooks, he said quietly, are we ready to proceed with departure? Victoria closed her laptop and looked around first class one final time. Amanda Richardson was still crying quietly in row 3. Other passengers were finishing their social media posts and live streams. Elena and Brandon were providing final commentary to their massive audiences. Not yet, Captain Victoria replied. There's one more thing. She stood and addressed the entire first-class cabin, directly speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear and every camera to record. Ladies and gentlemen, Victoria announced what you've witnessed today represents both the problem and the solution to discrimination in corporate America. The impromptu speech was captured by multiple cameras and shared instantly across social media platforms, creating what would become one of the most viewed corporate accountability moments in Internet history. Mrs. Richardson's assumptions about who belongs in first class reflect biases that exist throughout our society. Victoria continued. But they also reveal how those biases can be challenged when victims have sufficient power and resources to demand accountability. Amanda looked up, understanding that Victoria was using her behavior as a teaching moment rather than simply seeking punishment. The question isn't whether discrimination exists, Victoria said. The question is whether we'll use our voices, our resources, and our platforms to address it when we encounter it. She looked directly at the cameras that were broadcasting her words to millions of viewers worldwide. Today, discrimination was met with consequences. Tomorrow, let's make sure it's met with prevention. The speech concluded to spontaneous applause from passengers throughout first class, but Victoria raised her hand for silence. Captain Walsh, she said, returning to her seat. Now we're ready for departure. Flight 447 finally departed Los Angeles, 93 minutes behind schedule, but the delay had produced something unprecedented, a comprehensive corporate reform agreement negotiated in real time and documented by millions of social media viewers worldwide. As the aircraft climbed toward cruising altitude, the passengers in first class were processing what they had witnessed. Elena Vasquez continued her live stream, now addressing an audience of over 600,000 viewers who had followed the entire confrontation and resolution. "What you've seen today," Elena said into her camera, "is how individual courage and corporate power can combine to create immediate change." Victoria Brooks didn't just defend herself, she used her platform to protect future passengers from similar discrimination. The global audience was sharing their own experiences across social media, creating a worldwide conversation about travel discrimination, corporate accountability, and the role of privilege in fighting bias. Victoria now settled in her rightfully assigned seat. 1A opened her laptop to review messages from her team at Phoenix Technologies. Her assistant, Michael Torres, had been coordinating with media outlets, civil rights organizations, and other corporate leaders who wanted to understand how the incident had evolved into comprehensive policy reform. Victoria Michael's text message read, "The New York meeting is requesting to extend your time based on today's events. They want to discuss how Phoenix Technologies' bias detection algorithms could be implemented across multiple industries." Victoria smiled as she typed her response. "Tell them I'm very interested. Today proved that our technology can identify and prevent discrimination in real time. Let's explore broader applications. The business implications of the incident extended far beyond airline policy reform." Victoria had demonstrated that sophisticated bias detection technology could reveal patterns of discrimination that might otherwise remain hidden, creating opportunities for Phoenix Technologies to expand into new markets. Amanda Richardson, seated in row 3, was experiencing a very different kind of transformation. The 90-minute delay had given her time to fully process what her behavior had triggered and what her future would look like. Her phone showed hundreds of social media mentions, most critical, but some supportive from people who appreciated that she had accepted responsibility and agreed to education, rather than fighting the consequences. The path forward would be difficult, but it existed. Richard had spent the delay coordinating with their attorney and public relations consultant about damage control strategies. The Richardson Properties website had been restored with a statement acknowledging Amanda's behavior and announcing her commitment to diversity training and community service. Amanda Richards said quietly, "Our attorney thinks this can be managed if you follow through completely on everything you agreed to. The public respects accountability when it's genuine." Amanda nodded, understanding that her only path to reputation recovery lay in demonstrating real change rather than offering empty apologies. As the flight continued toward New York, passengers began sharing their documentation of the incident across social media platforms. The hashtags Flight447 and Victoria Brooks were trending globally, joined by new tags like corporate accountability and discrimination prevention. Brandon had ended his live stream but continued posting highlight clips that were being shared millions of times. His final video, featuring Victoria's speech about using power to prevent discrimination, became one of the most viral corporate accountability moments in social media history. The impact extended beyond individual social media posts to mainstream news coverage. CNN, NBC, and Fox News were all leading their evening broadcasts with the story featuring aviation experts, civil rights leaders, and corporate accountability specialists discussing the broader implications. Victoria's phone rang during the flight. She recognized the number as belonging to James Morrison, CEO of Global Logistics, one of Phoenix Technologies' major competitors. Victoria Morrison said, "I've been following the news coverage. What happened today was remarkable corporate leadership. I wanted to discuss whether Phoenix Technologies would be interested in licensing your bias detection algorithms to other technology companies." The call represented immediate business opportunities created by the incident. Victoria's demonstration of real-time discrimination analysis had generated interest from companies across multiple industries who wanted to implement similar monitoring systems. James Victoria replied, "I'd be very interested in that conversation. But let me be clear, the technology comes with mandatory implementation requirements. Companies can't license bias detection algorithms and then ignore what they reveal." The distinction was crucial. Victoria was ensuring that her technology would be used to prevent discrimination rather than simply documenting it after the fact. The flight attendant, Carmen Martinez, approached Victoria's seat carrying a handwritten note. Ms. Brooks. Carmen said Captain Walsh asked me to give you this message from Skyline Airlines headquarters. Victoria opened the note, which contained a formal acknowledgement that her discrimination complaint had resulted in immediate policy changes across the airline's entire operation, along with a commitment to implement her recommended reforms within the agreed timeline. But the note also included something more personal. Your courage in demanding accountability has protected thousands of future passengers who will never experience what you experienced today. Elena, still documenting the flight, captured Victoria's reaction to the message. She's not celebrating, Elena narrated to her camera. She looks satisfied but serious, like someone who understands the work isn't finished. The observation was accurate. Victoria understood that individual incidents of accountability, while important, didn't solve institutional problems. The real work would happen over months and years as airlines implemented comprehensive bias prevention programs. Her laptop showed ongoing communication from Phoenix Technologies' legal team, who were fielding interview requests from business schools that wanted to use the incident as a case study in corporate crisis management and discrimination response. Victoria came another message from Michael Torres. Harvard Business School wants to create a case study about real-time corporate negotiation using technological leverage. They're calling it Brooks versus Richardson Technology Power and Corporate Accountability. Victoria considered the request carefully. Academic analysis could help other corporate leaders understand how to address discrimination incidents when they occurred, creating broader institutional change beyond the airline industry. She typed back, "Yes, but with conditions. The case study must include specific protocols for bias detection and response. I want it to be a practical guide for corporate leaders, not just an academic exercise." The flight was approaching New York airspace when Victoria received a call that would transform the incident's impact from corporate accountability to industry-wide reform. Ms. Brooks, came the voice through her phone. This is Secretary Patricia Williams from the Department of Transportation. I've been following today's events, and I'd like to discuss implementing Phoenix Technologies' bias detection technology across all major airlines as part of federal passenger protection requirements. The call represented the ultimate expansion of the incident's impact. Victoria's individual experience could become the catalyst for government-mandated discrimination prevention across the entire aviation industry. Secretary Williams. Victoria replied, "I'd be very interested in that discussion, but implementation would require more than technology. It would require comprehensive training and accountability measures. We're prepared to discuss comprehensive reform," Williams confirmed. What happened on Flight 447 revealed problems that extend throughout commercial aviation. As the aircraft began its descent into JFK Airport, Victoria reflected on how the day had evolved. She had boarded the plane as a passenger traveling to close a business deal. She was landing as someone who had used corporate power to create immediate discrimination prevention measures and potential industry-wide reform. The original business meeting in New York had been expanded to include discussions about Phoenix Technologies' bias detection technology and its applications beyond aviation. The morning's discrimination incident had become the afternoon's corporate innovation opportunity. Elena concluded her coverage with a final message to her global audience. What you've witnessed today proves that discrimination can be challenged successfully when victims have resources, courage, and strategic thinking. Victoria Brooks didn't just defend herself, she created a model for corporate accountability that other leaders can follow. The aircraft touched down at JFK with passengers who had documented one of the most significant discrimination accountability incidents in modern corporate history. But for Victoria, the real work was just beginning. As passengers prepared to deplane, Amanda Richardson approached Victoria's seat. Her earlier arrogance had been replaced by obvious remorse and genuine humility. "Ms. Brooks," Amanda said quietly, I want you to know that I understand what I did was wrong and I'm committed to the changes you've required. Thank you for creating accountability, rather than just seeking punishment." Victoria looked at Amanda with an expression that combined authority with forgiveness. "Mrs. Richardson, change is possible when people are willing to confront their assumptions and do the work. I hope you follow through completely." The exchange was captured by multiple passengers and shared across social media as an example of how accountability conversations could lead to genuine growth rather than just viral shame. But as Victoria gathered her belongings and prepared to exit the aircraft, she was already thinking about the broader implications of the day's events. Individual accountability was important, but structural change was essential. The discrimination she had experienced on Flight 447 would become the catalyst for comprehensive aviation industry reform, expanded bias detection technology, and new models for corporate accountability. Most importantly, it would ensure that future passengers who didn't have her resources and platform would still be protected from the kind of treatment she had endured. As she walked through JFK Airport toward her waiting car service, Victoria's phone buzzed with a message from her daughter at Stanford. "Mom, I saw the news. I'm proud of you for standing up. Change the world." Victoria smiled and typed back, "Change started today. Tomorrow we make it permanent." The immediate aftermath of Flight 447 created a social media phenomenon that extended far beyond typical viral incidents. Amanda Richardson's discriminatory behavior had been documented by multiple passengers and shared across platforms, generating millions of views and creating lasting digital consequences that would follow her for years. Within hours of landing, Amanda Richardson was trending globally with over 3 million mentions. Her photograph appeared on news websites worldwide, accompanied by headlines like "Racist Passenger," "Learns Expensive Lesson," and "When Privilege Meets Power," the Flight 447 incident. The speed and scale of digital accountability meant that Amanda's personal and professional life was being scrutinized by millions of people who were sharing their own experiences with discrimination and discussing the broader implications of her behavior. Richardson Properties, the real estate company Amanda had mentioned during her confrontation with Victoria, was flooded with negative reviews and cancellation requests. The firm's website crashed multiple times as people searched for information about the company's diversity policies and business practices. Richard, whose financial consulting practice was also affected by association, spent the days following the incident, managing client concerns, and explaining his wife's behavior to long-time business relationships that were suddenly in jeopardy. "Amanda," he said during one of their most difficult conversations, "we have to understand that this isn't going away. Your behavior is being used in corporate training programs, diversity workshops, and academic case studies. We need to focus on genuine change, not damage control." The scope of consequences extended beyond professional impacts to personal relationships. Amanda's country club membership was suspended pending review of conduct standards. Several social organizations where she held leadership positions requested her resignation. Friends and acquaintances were distancing themselves from association with someone who had become a symbol of casual racism. But within the comprehensive social media coverage, some voices began emerging in support of accountability over cancellation. People appreciated that Amanda had accepted responsibility immediately, rather than fighting the consequences or claiming her words had been taken out of context. Elena Vasquez, whose live coverage had helped document the incident, posted a follow-up video that received significant attention. Amanda Richardson did something terrible, but she also did something important. She accepted accountability and agreed to education. That's how change actually happens. The perspective resonated with viewers who understood that sustainable social progress required opportunities for growth and redemption rather than permanent punishment. Phoenix Technologies announced that Amanda would be participating in their newly developed corporate bias recognition program, a comprehensive educational initiative designed specifically for individuals whose discriminatory behavior had been documented in professional settings. The program included 40 hours of diversity education, sensitivity training, and personal reflection exercises designed to help participants understand how their assumptions affected others. Amanda would be one of the first participants in what Victoria hoped would become a model for addressing discrimination incidents across corporate America. The goal isn't punishment, Victoria explained in her first media interview following the incident. The goal is prevention. Amanda Richardson's behavior was terrible, but her willingness to accept education and change represents an opportunity to prevent similar incidents in the future. Amanda's community service requirement connected her with organizations she had never previously encountered. She was assigned to work with the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People's Travel Advocacy Program, helping passengers who had experienced airline discrimination file complaints and seek resolution. Her first day of community service was documented by local news outlets, showing Amanda listening to stories from passengers who had experienced the same kind of treatment she had inflicted on Victoria. The emotional impact of hearing how her behavior affected real people became a catalyst for genuine personal reflection. "I never thought about how my assumptions hurt other people," Amanda said in a statement released through her attorney. "Hearing these stories has helped me understand that my behavior wasn't just rude, it was harmful to individuals and damaging to the entire travel experience." The statement was carefully crafted, but appeared to reflect genuine remorse rather than strategic public relations. Amanda was beginning to understand that her path back to respectability would require sustained personal work rather than simple apologies. Richard's business relationships began stabilizing as clients observed Amanda's commitment to the accountability measures Victoria had established. Several corporate partners expressed support for genuine change efforts while maintaining distance from the original incident. The Richardson family's financial situation required significant adjustment. Legal fees, public relations consultants, and donation requirements associated with Amanda's community service created substantial expenses. Some business relationships that had taken years to build were lost permanently, but unexpected opportunities also emerged. Several diversity consulting firms approached Amanda about sharing her experience in corporate training programs, offering payment for honest discussions about how bias affects business relationships and customer service. "I never imagined my worst moment would become a way to help other people," Amanda told Richard during one of their conversations about their changing lives. "But if talking about what I did wrong helps prevent other people from making the same mistakes, then maybe something good can come from this." The possibility of redemption through education and service created a different kind of narrative than typical social media accountability cycles. Instead of simply destroying Amanda's reputation, the incident was generating opportunities for genuine learning and change. 6 months after Flight 447, Amanda completed her diversity education requirements and began participating in Phoenix Technology's bias prevention workshops. Her role involved sharing her experience with corporate executives and discussing how assumptions about customers and colleagues could create discrimination incidents. The work was humbling and often uncomfortable, but it was also meaningful. Amanda discovered that her experience resonated with business leaders who recognized similar assumptions in their own thinking and wanted to prevent discrimination in their organizations. "Change is possible," Victoria said when asked about Amanda's progress during a later interview, "but it requires genuine commitment to confronting uncomfortable truths about yourself and doing the sustained work of building better habits and assumptions." The Richardson family's story became a case study in how accountability could lead to redemption when consequences were paired with education and opportunities for service. Their experience demonstrated that social media accountability could create positive change rather than simply punishment. Richard's financial consulting practice eventually recovered and grew stronger as he developed expertise in helping businesses address reputation crises and implement genuine diversity initiatives. His personal experience with the consequences of discriminatory behavior gave him unique credibility, with clients facing similar challenges. Amanda's transformation was documented by researchers studying how individuals could recover from viral discrimination incidents through sustained commitment to change. Her case became a model for addressing bias in corporate settings, demonstrating that accountability could lead to growth when properly structured. But the most important measure of Amanda's change was reflected in the passengers who encountered her during subsequent travel. Her behavior toward airline staff, fellow passengers, and service workers demonstrated the kind of consistent respect that indicated genuine personal growth rather than performance. The story of Amanda Richardson's accountability and redemption became as important as the original incident in demonstrating how discrimination could be addressed through education and sustained change rather than permanent consequences. Her experience provided a roadmap for other individuals whose biases had caused harm, showing that genuine change was possible when people were willing to confront their assumptions and commit to different behavior. As Victoria had recognized from the beginning, sustainable change required more than punishment. It required creating opportunities for growth, education, and service that could prevent future incidents while offering genuine paths to redemption for those willing to do the necessary work. The Flight 447 incident became a watershed moment in corporate accountability and discrimination prevention, creating changes that extended far beyond the initial confrontation between Victoria Brooks and Amanda Richardson. Within 6 months, Phoenix Technologies' bias detection algorithms had been implemented by 47 airlines worldwide, creating real-time monitoring systems that could identify discriminatory patterns before they became widespread problems. The technology that Victoria had used to analyze Skyline Airlines' passenger service data became an industry standard for identifying and preventing bias in customer service interactions. The Federal Aviation Administration adopted new regulations requiring all major carriers to implement discrimination monitoring systems and provide comprehensive bias training for customer-facing employees. Secretary Patricia Williams credited the Flight 447 incident with revealing institutional gaps in passenger protection that required immediate federal intervention. Skyline Airlines became a model for discrimination prevention in the aviation industry. Their comprehensive policy reforms, implemented under Victoria's direct oversight, resulted in a 73% reduction in passenger discrimination complaints within the first year. More importantly, the airline's new training protocols were adopted by competitors across the industry who recognized that discrimination prevention was essential for customer satisfaction and brand protection. The incident's impact extended beyond aviation into multiple industries. Victoria's demonstration of real-time bias analysis had attracted attention from corporate leaders in hospitality, retail, and financial services who wanted to implement similar monitoring systems. Phoenix Technologies launched a new division specifically focused on discrimination prevention technology, creating software platforms that could identify bias patterns in everything from loan applications to job interviews to restaurant service. The Flight 447 incident proved that bias is measurable, predictable, and preventable, Victoria explained during a keynote address at the National Diversity Conference. Technology can identify discrimination before it becomes widespread, and corporate leadership can address it before it causes widespread harm. Amanda Richardson's journey from viral racism to diversity education became equally significant in demonstrating how accountability could create positive change rather than just punishment. Her participation in Phoenix Technologies' bias recognition program led to a comprehensive curriculum that was adopted by companies worldwide for addressing discrimination incidents. Her story was featured in Harvard Business School's corporate accountability case studies, demonstrating how individuals could recover from discriminatory behavior through sustained education and community service, rather than permanent career destruction. The Richardson family's experience created a new model for addressing viral accountability incidents, showing that consequences could include redemption opportunities when paired with genuine commitment to change. "What happened to my family was painful," Amanda said during a diversity workshop she now facilitates. "But it was also necessary. I had to confront how my assumptions hurt other people before I could change my behavior." Her transformation resonated with corporate executives who recognized similar biases in their own thinking and wanted to address them before they caused discrimination incidents. Victoria's approach to the incident, demanding comprehensive change rather than simply seeking personal satisfaction, became a model for how corporate leaders could address discrimination when they encountered it. Her emphasis on prevention over punishment influenced corporate accountability practices across multiple industries, demonstrating that sustainable change required structural reforms rather than individual consequences alone. The social media documentation of Flight 447 created lasting digital history that continued influencing conversations about travel discrimination, corporate power, and accountability months after the original incident. Elena Vasquez's live coverage became required viewing in journalism schools studying real-time reporting of discrimination incidents. Her approach to documenting injustice without sensationalizing it set standards for covering bias incidents in professional settings. Brandon Foster's audience engagement during the live stream demonstrated how social media could create immediate accountability for discriminatory behavior while building community around shared values of dignity and respect. The global conversation generated by Flight 447 influenced discrimination prevention policies in 37 countries, with transportation authorities implementing new requirements for bias training and passenger protection based on the incident's lessons. Victoria's use of corporate leverage to demand immediate policy changes inspired other executives to address discrimination in their industries. A network of business leaders emerged who committed to using their platforms to fight bias when they encountered it, rather than treating it as someone else's responsibility. Phoenix Technologies' stock price increased 47% in the year following Flight 447, as investors recognized the commercial potential of bias detection technology and Victoria's leadership in addressing social justice issues. But the most important impact was measured in the experiences of individual passengers who benefited from the policy changes Victoria had negotiated. Thousands of travelers encountered improved service, respectful treatment, and protection from discrimination because of reforms implemented after Flight 447. The incident demonstrated that individual courage combined with corporate resources and technological capabilities could create immediate and lasting change in how institutions addressed bias and discrimination. Victoria's legacy extended beyond business success to include fundamental improvements in how airlines and eventually other industries protected customers from discriminatory treatment. Her approach proved that accountability could create prevention, that consequences could include education, and that viral incidents could generate lasting institutional reform when properly leveraged by leaders willing to demand comprehensive change. The Flight 447 incident became more than a discrimination complaint or social media moment. It became a case study in how individual experiences of injustice could be transformed into institutional change that protected countless future victims. Most importantly, it demonstrated that dignity was not negotiable, that assumptions based on race were unacceptable in professional settings, and that people with power had responsibility to use it for protecting those who might not be able to protect themselves. Victoria Brooks had boarded Flight 447 as a passenger traveling to a business meeting. She landed as someone who had changed how an entire industry addressed discrimination, created new standards for corporate accountability, and demonstrated that individual courage could generate institutional transformation. The seat she had fought for in first class had become a platform for ensuring that every passenger, regardless of race or background, would be treated with the dignity and respect that should be universal in human interactions. 6 months later, discrimination complaints in the airline industry dropped 40% due to Victoria's reforms, and Amanda's experience had become a powerful teaching tool for corporate bias prevention. Amanda Richardson completed her community service and publicly apologized, crediting the experience with fundamentally changing her worldview and approach to interacting with people from different backgrounds. Victoria Brooks was named Time Person of the Year for proving that individual courage and corporate power could combine to create immediate institutional change when someone was willing to demand accountability instead of accepting injustice. If this story of courage, accountability, and transformation inspired you, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends and family. Your share could reach someone who needs to hear this message about dignity, respect, and the power of standing up for what's right. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss stories about justice, inspiration, and the incredible things that happen when people refuse to accept discrimination. Drop a comment below and tell us about a time you witnessed someone stand up against injustice, or share your thoughts about how we can create a world where everyone is treated with the respect they deserve. Because when we stand together, when we share these stories, and when we demand better from the world around us, that's when real change happens. Thank you for watching, and remember that your voice matters. Your dignity is non-negotiable, and together we can build a better tomorrow.